All right, we want to delve deeper into what is happening in the health sector in the country, especially during this flood disaster moment. And I want to, of course, acknowledge Seth Panyako, who is the Secretary General, Kenya National Union of Nurses. And also with us is a policy analyst, Michael Agwanda. They shall speak in a short while. But indeed, gentlemen, it's good that people hear your voices, your opening remarks. Seth, especially you, being at the center of what now looks like a looming strike by the nurses. Remember, Kenya is already hurting from the doctor's strike that so far we're looking at the 55th day today. But what would be opening remarks this far tonight? Welcome to the broadcast.
The opening remarks will be that we need the government to realize that it's a government and it must work as a jointed government and not as a disjointed government where every officer of the government, the cabinet secretaries are issuing directives that contradict each other to the detriment of the Kenyans. It must be known that a government must be a government that is truthful, a government that is reliable, and a government that when it gives promises to our citizens, to our public servants, those promises are fulfilled.
All right. You're on record, according to some analysis, that for a longer period of time, you seem to have understood the government to a certain extent. I mean, there seems to be a change of tune for you being at the center of what is a nurses strike. Kenyans would be asking, or your critics are asking, what changed?
It's nothing has changed
because
right. You see, we do not. Many people think that we join strikes. We don't join industrial actions. We go on strike.
Okay.
When we have processed our issues through the laid down procedures and the law, and we have reached what we call a deadlock, that what we want from the government or the employer is not being done, yet promises have been made.
Okay.
In this case, why we are saying that the nurses might be going on strike is that the government has made our leadership look like we are conmen. We are liars. The government promised us that it's going to employ nurses who are UHC. Indeed, the entire group of about 8,000 UHC staff. And it shows us a budget of 7.5 billion. And they had 4.2 billion. They had a deficit of 3.5 billion. Okay. And they said the treasurer had agreed to put in supplementary budget next year because what they had was almost a half year. And it's in writing. They gave us in writing. Okay. And that's why we promised our members that, look here, the government has told us going to employ you on permanent and pensionable in June. Then another office of government goes to the Senate and says, from nowhere, says that now Public Service Commission has now approved a cane for this group of workers to be added another 2 years, making them on contract for 6 years. All of us in Kenya, we know that people who are on contract for 6 years are commissioners. And we know what they are paid. So you cannot keep an ordinary Kenyan on a dubious contract that's not backed by law on 6 years. And therefore, that now, when today I take any letter or any communication from government, then I take to the members and say, look, this is what the government has promised. We don't have to go on strike. Do you think those members will trust me anymore? And
I want to come back to you because the question is, which CBA is in question? Why did this particular, medics allow themselves to get into this, what now Seth here is calling dubious contracts? Mike Agwanda, thank you very much for putting time here. Listening to what is happening, looking at what has been happening, the question would be, we have a system that ought to work. We have a promulgated Constitution 2010. It envisaged a number of things should be working seamlessly. But health is not a privilege. It is a right. Is it a policy systemic problem at this point in time, or do we just but lack policies to work hand in hand with what we are having on the table served to professionals in this country?
Thanks for having me here. And to our viewers, I just want to highlight the fact that, one, the doctors are still on strike, and two, the clinicians, or what the Americans would call physician assistants, are still on strike.
36 days
and the lab technicians are still on strike. That technically leaves the nurses who cannot do any medical examination in equipments or like lab technicians. It leaves the nurses who can't clerk patients, and they're not allowed by law to do that. And it also leaves the nurses to manage the hospitals for that reason. Remember, the doctors who are on strike are consultants, they are residents, and as well as the medical officers. So basically, from where we are, nothing is happening in government hospital. And if nothing is happening in government hospital, then that should be a wake-up moment. And 55 days is too many days for somebody to slumber and not say, who does the buck stop with at this particular moment? That's a fundamental question we want to ask. Does it stop with Minister of Health? Seemingly not. Does it stop with the Secretary to the Cabinet? Seemingly not. Does it stop with the governors? Seemingly not. Okay. And now, perhaps we need to escalate this discussion to a different level if we want our hospitals to be open. What Kenyans want out there is not stories of who earns what and who does what and who gives authority and who gives, the order for the doctors to go back or which court is dealing with it. They want the hospitals to be open. Today, I looked on TV and KTN really gave a huge analysis of people suffering from cancer. Right. Majority of those people often go to Kenyatta National Hospital. And now, if Kenyatta National Hospital, and I have a cousin of mine that has been going for chemotherapy at Kenyatta National Hospital, he was supposed to come back last month for review. He was told he can't come. What happens when they cannot get their chemo? What happens when terminal illness is taking a toll on them? What happens to the rights of Kenyans, and that is health? When we are having 55 days and we're still playing ping-pong games with the doctors.
Indeed, let me come back to you, calling that ping-pong games with the doctors. Seth Panyako, what happens to these patients? You do realize that from the analysis that Mike has put on the table, you are the only people left in these hospitals as per his analysis. So maybe the Kenyans would love to hear, if you do join, what happens?
We will not join. We will go on strike if we...
So you will not join?
We will not join. We'll be going on our own strike with our own issues, not related to the doctors' issues completely. That has to be very clear. And at this moment, we are waiting for the meeting of the National Governing Council. Right. That will happen next year, next week on 17th, to be very precise, to decide whether we'll go on strike or not, because I have no powers to issue a strike notice. They only direct me to speak on their behalf. Okay. It will be very unfortunate for nurses to go on strike, because if we go on a national strike, we are the only cadre within the health sector that closes hospitals and walk away with keys. Once we leave those hospitals, there will be nothing. When we come back, they'll start sweeping around, they'll start slashing around, they'll start mowing grass around, because everything will have gone to the dogs. There will only be rats and flies moving around the hospitals. But even when you close, flies move away because there's nothing. So we hope that the issue that we have raised to the government are able to be resolved within this time and 17th, so that we don't go on strike. But I want to correct my brother, Mike. He's saying that nurses are not allowed to prescribe or see patients. We see and clerk patients. When you go to a dispensary, the only doctor you get there is a nurse. The only clinical officer you get is a nurse. The only medical lab you get at dispensary is a nurse. The only person you get at dispensary is a nurse.
But you give prescriptions.
Yes, he's everything. He does everything at a dispensary level. When you go to health center, that's what you call level 3. Now you get the clinical officers and nurses. Doctors now come in from level 4 going forward. We are not trying to say that nurses can work without doctors or can work without other healthcare workers. We work as a team. But it's not right to say nurses cannot prescribe, nurses cannot see patients. Like when you go to labor ward, they prescribe all over the world. Because you cannot wait for a doctor to come and make a prescription when a patient has given birth, like when you are giving comedrine and other medicine. Those are prescribed by nurses specifically. But what I'm saying is we cannot have a functional healthcare system when the entire healthcare workers are not working. Especially the doctors, the clinical officers, the medical lab people. Those are the key fellows. If they're not there, literally nothing goes on.
All right, I'm tasked this very moment to just, of course, look into the archives. And over the weekend, this is where what the main concern was, of course, emerged from. And we just want to play a clip by you, Seth. Speaking over the weekend, and I want to come back to Mike with his remarks on this particular clip, and saying they will give some time, there's an ultimatum, but after that convening, they will start their own strike, not really joining. Let's see if we heard that correctly earlier on.
There is a deliberate move by the government to force all trade unions to go on the street in health sector in order to kill health sector in Kenya and hand it over to the public-private sector. Let the government come out clear. They are triggering us to go on strike. If that is what they want, we will give them. And the CS is speaking in the Senate, when the question is posed to her on the plight of UHC, she says, in fact, I've just received a message now, the Public Service Commission has approved an extension of 2 more years. This is another lie. Because they lied to us as a union that they will engage the people, our UHC, on permanent and pensionable. And in the process, they made me lie to my members. The people only who are on contract in Kenya for 6 years are commissioners. If they want to keep our nurses and other UHC staff on 6-year contract, then they must pay them like commissioners.
We cannot allow it to continue. When our members are suffering, when they go to the hospitals, they cannot be treated because they are in arrears for the medical covers, they cannot get their pensions, and they cannot get other insurance services.
Well, that was over the weekend. Very vital for us to, of course, hear what Mike would say on that. And, of course, Seth is here to clarify what ought to be clarified. Just to remind you, our lines are open. We will be opening those lines as well so that you can call in and ask in as many questions as you may. Mike, listening to those remarks, Seth saying the government is intentionally killing the health sector. Is it not a dismay?
One of the things that I have to say is on what Seth Panerko has just said, with tremendous respect, saying that they can prescribe medicine and they can sometimes, if they're the only people that when they're on strike, the keys will be, they'll be able to go with the key and leave the hospitals not functioning. Maybe not. Maybe that's how he thinks. But I really think that this would have been the moment for them to join the doctors. Because planning to go on another strike, in my own view, is just subjecting the health sector to another strenuous opportunity to get the best they can get, and the sufferer will not be them or the doctors, but the patients. But this is how I look at it. I have never gone to any pharmacy and then gone with a prescription of a nurse for that reason and then be given drugs for that reason. But if it's a doctor, there are many, many pharmacies in this country that will still insist on a doctor giving you, and that's what the law prescribe. And therefore, the illusion that the nurses really are the ones that, now running the facilities. Running facilities from what? It is not by being in the facilities, but it's being by patients being investigated. Oh Lord, being investigated for that reason. I'm prosecuting my own.
You're misleading.
Being investigated for that reason.
All right, Mike. So just a second.
Don't interfere with the process. Let's talk about strike.
These are
not
policies.
Who does what in health.
These are policies.
Not
what people here say.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, these are policies. The doctor prescribe. The doctors instruct them
not
for that reason.
They are levels.
Sorry,
there are levels which you don't know.
I totally agree.
He doesn't even know that there are even doctors who don't prescribe certain medicines.
I have not reached there, so don't speak on my behalf.
Mike, maybe if I bring it on the table, what Seth here spoke on is that at different levels, all right, of accessing, healthcare.
Exactly.
You will find nurses' position in certain levels, except 4 and 5, where the doctor is needed. That was his, remark on that point. Are you disqualifying that factor?
I totally agree.
Yes.
What I am saying, at a certain level, that nurse will look for a doctor. that nurse will have to refer that patient who is sick, who might be having a chronic disease, to a doctor. If that doctor is not there, the treatment ends there because nobody else is going to see that doctor. We have to agree on that. Okay, that's the policy, this treatment policy in this country. But let me come and again just make this very, very clear. What I will not want to see is the doctors on strike, the physician assistants are on strike, or clinical officers, the lab technicians are on strike. Then the nurses come out and say, oh, let's just wait, we are also soon going on strike. That is a strategy to punish people. And let me tell you one thing. I really, with tremendous respect to Mr. Panyako, and I don't want to say this, when I was coming here, somebody told me this, and maybe not for this session, but he said, perhaps Mr. Panyako has lost the right to bargain for the nurses because he joined the very government that is now fighting. And therefore, for him to lobby and to pretend that he's fighting for the nurses when he's out of the government, perhaps is going not just to give it a tail moment of it, and for them not to get whatever they want when they're going on strike, but perhaps even prolong it further. It would have been better if these matters are resolved today so that we know that the nurses get their portion, the doctors get their portion, the clinicians get their portion, as well as the pharmacists get their portion, as well as the med technician gets their portion. In that way, it is concluded at once.
Let me hear from him, because now critics are coming out to say you're being hypocritical.
I think these discussions should have centered more on what's happening in the country than on Panyako.
All right.
I want to correct him because he doesn't know what's happening in labor movement.
All right.
Most of the members of parliament we have today are trade unionists. He knows Omboka Milemba, who is the chairman for Kubet. He's also the secretary general for Amani National Congress. And many, many. When you look at the history of this country, people like Joseph Tomboya, the founders of trade union Kotu Kenya in Kenya, people, they were members of parliament, and they were also trade unionists. Somebody like Kalonzo Musyoka used to sit on Kotu Kenya board to represent KANU. So I'm not in government. I don't earn from government. Government is not my employer. So that's a simplistic way of looking at things without really trying to critically analyze issues. I am not the only trade unionist. I have not been elected, for information. We have those who are elected, and they are holding key positions in political parties. So why would somebody talk about it? We have Kubet, we have NAT. Most three-quarters, like Wabirianga. Wabirianga is woman representative for Kubet. Why are they not talking about her? You see, these issues that because I have a position in Kenya Kwanza, so people of Azimio want to fight me using that is just simplistic and normal Kenya tribal politics.
That aside,
let us go back to the issue.
Yes, because the question,
I am a healthcare worker, and I know the system and how it works. We have a dispensary completely manned by nurses. We have health centers manned by nurses and clinical officers. At these levels, and I have told you earlier that nurses cannot work alone.
Right.
So for somebody to sit here, hearing what I'm saying, and completely saying something opposite, it means that the level of discussion is not at my level. Because I've said clearly that when you are at level 1, there are reasons why nurses were put at level 1.
Okay.
There are reasons why nurses were put at level 2, not level 1, level, because level 1 we have community health promoters.
Yes.
These ones that were being launched recently. At level 2, that's a dispensary. We have nurses only. You maybe will get a watchman if you are lucky. A nurse and a watchman. Level 3, you get clinical officers and nurses. There are reasons why those health workers were stationed there. Perhaps in the next world, when Kenya has grown and is able to employ more doctors, I'll be happy to find a doctor at a dispensary.
Let me come to the main thing here. I'm looking at, I think this is your website, KNUN, for Unity, Protection and Empowerment, I believe. And I'm looking at 2023 December, is it, that you updated this on the 20th of December. Speaking of this CBA that you said is good news for the nurses, as it has enhanced nurses' uniform allowance and the health risk allowance. All right, gentlemen, just walk with me. And the document also has also other terms and conditions of service improved, and now it awaits registration at the Employment and Labor Relations Court. That is back then, what you updated in 2023. Is this the issue of contention?
The issue is that this CPA we have been chasing for the last, since we were registered as a union.
Okay.
Though we have CPA with other arms of government, especially state corporations. But this is the CPA that has not been registered. But from where I sit, I just received a phone call today from the ministry.
All right.
Saying that SRC has responded. Tomorrow morning I'm going to the ministry to see the response that the ministry gave to SRC. So that probably we might sign that CBA before 17th, when the National Governing Council is meeting.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that when the Governing Council is going to meet, the must is going to proclaim a strike. We were on strike in 2017 for 6 months. No one joined us. Doctors went for 100 days. We never joined them. So what we are saying is that if there is a need for a joint action, we can do that. But when you go on strike and somebody is saying my CPA has not been implemented, and you are on the table, you are about to sign yours, when you go on strike with your operators, what you're doing on the table, we cannot do that. Definitely. That will be unwise. And for somebody to claim that I've failed to represent my members without giving facts,
all right,
it's something that is just political. It has no basis. Yeah.
All right, now I'm informed we have callers, of course, who are reaching us from their homes, and I hope that we can objectively respond to you. Now, Lemayan, calling all the way from Narok. In fact, with the situation and the floods going on, thank you very much for joining us tonight. If you can hear me, please bring in your sentiments and any questions in that regard. Lemayan.
Me, Monayo, not Lemayan.
Yes.
Monayo. Naongea juu ya madaktari. Madaktari wako sawa. Hello?
Lipi?
You talking? Yes. Madaktari wako sawa. Sababu wanadai haki yao. Unajua mtoto ukimwambia kwamba unaenda sokoni unamletea peremende. Ama pia muahidi akifanya kazi yake mzuri, Christmas unamnunulia nguo mzuri. Ndio Christmas ifike na agreement usitimishe. Unajua hiyo ni mbaya. Sasa hii serikali mwenye ako saa hii uongozini ambaye ndiye Mheshimiwa Ruto ndiye alikuwa wakati huo. Sasa abataki awatimishie haki yao ndiko wananchi wasidi kusaidia na hao je atuambie mambo na nini nyumba mara atapre mgomiza jabata azitimishwi. So ni kama kwa kweli tunatanganya kila mara waje na manyumba ahudumie wananchi wale ambao wamempigia kura akakoa huko. Sasa hiyo nyumba iko kumpigia kura wacha apewa madaktari haki yao niko nao wafurahi na kazi yao.
Aya, sawa.
Alafu tena hii mambo ya kuambia madaktari ndio yafikiri ndio za mwelewane. Hiyo ni serikali inafaa kuambiwa we ought to sit down with the concern na madaktari mumbatane, sababu hiyo agreement ya mambo na CPA au ndio walisaini wakiwa pamoja.
Aya, asante sana Zachary Napiga all the way from Kisii. Mike, let's pick it from there. According to him, there ought to be some level of understanding. And he's saying that the doctors are just calling out for their rights. There's need for the government to understand the health practitioners at this point in time.
My partner here says that when he joined UDA, the people in Azimio, there is no hospital that is called UDA or Azimio in this country.
All right.
It doesn't matter which party you voted for. When people go to the hospital today and they find the hospital closed, they are suffering and they need help and they need remedy right now. That's what we need to understand. The government in place must be able to provide a solution regardless of who they are, because they may not be the ones that are suffering from lack of doctors within those dispensaries, within those levels of hospitals my friend is mentioning here. When they're sick, they will probably be flown out of this country. But what about the 99.9 Kenyans who are getting sick every day? Now look at what is happening. We have flood that is coming up.
Right.
And
it's actually ongoing.
Ongoing,
yes.
Ongoing. And there are already fears of cholera outbreak.
Right.
When cholera, for one reason or the other, God forbid that it happens, that there will be a cholera outbreak today. Will the nurses be able to protect people from cholera? Will they be able to treat everybody that is suffering from cholera? Will we be able to have admissions in the hospital, especially on those critical care? Will we be able to have doctors that will be able to be in ICU if they are still on strike? What I am saying is the system must be left as it is. If the system is in such a way that we have consultants, we have MOs, and we have residents, we have nurses, and we have clinicians, and we have all these people, they must work. And it doesn't matter what type of government comes in place. One of the things that they must seem to be doing more than anything else is the system works. Whether it is in finance, or whether it is in taxes, whether it is in health, the system must work. And let me tell you, let me bring you to speed on some of the things that are happening today. When we're talking about doctors not being in the hospitals and many government hospitals being closed technically because the doctors are not there, the clinicians are not there, and the lab technicians are not there. Only the nurses are alleged to be present there, but I can tell you they're having a field day, because if we're talking about those levels that the doctors are not there and they're supposed to be there, say level 4, level 5, as my friend is trying to exert, then what are they doing when the doctors are not there? But what happens when suddenly there is a huge group of people and sick people that need to be admitted in the hospital? What's going to happen? What I am saying is, when you go to the hospitals today, it is not just the doctors who are not in those hospitals. But now when you go to the hospitals, even in private hospitals, some people will tell you, we don't take NHIF at another level. We don't take NHIF. And when they say that, and I took a patient to hospital just a few days ago, and they said, we don't take NHIF. Why don't you take NHIF? And my patient has NHIF. They said, no, they don't pay anymore. When we have a system breakdown, then the government must come in a very, very definitive way so that the people can get help. And when we are talking about transferring our NHIF to universal health, the question is, how long will that take when the hospitals are not being paid and people are not honoring the NHIF per se? What I am saying is this: are we having people that are being employed by His Excellency President William Somaya Ruto that are not able to do their job, and so giving the president just a bad name? Or are we having people who are just enjoying the positions and not necessarily what they were employing for?
Seth, I want to come back to you because the nurses play a very vital role in maternal healthcare.
Yes.
This is for sure. In those labor wards, in those, of course, theaters. And we're going to come back to Linda Mama, among other things. But we have a caller that we want to engage at this point in time, because this is about Kenyans, really, Seth and Mike. And Naftali Chedi is calling us from Elgeyo Marakwet. Naftali, habari za jioni. Please talk to us. Unataka kuuliza maneno yapi? Ground inasema nini?
Now, I have three things.
Yes.
First is my observation on the policy experts is that probably is total. Sorry?
Yes, we can hear you, Naftali. Proceed.
Yeah, no, my observation on the policy expert seems not to be aware of what is going on in the entire health system. So in this case, needs to understand properly how healthcare system operates in this country. Now, he is totally lost. He does not know the role of all the cutters in healthcare system. And that is why I second my Panyako when he talked of, he seems not to be understanding what is going on. But you talk about healthcare system, it is not only talking about the doctors alone. The system is so huge. It is very important and critical for the country to understand this fact, that nurses over up to 80% healthcare service in this country. We don't know, or there is no statistics to know who are these people being served in the service delivery point. Probably even if you say health center, dispensary, up to level 4. Clinical officers are there. Are doctors there? I think there is a very critical point that we are missing totally. And finally, my third point is on my on Panyako. Panyako talked about CBA. What is this CBA? What is the contents of this CBA? We don't know. Unless something else is to be told of what is going on. But Panyako should come out very clear and tell us the truth. Otherwise, the policy expert there does not know what is happening totally.
Thank you, Naftali. Thank you, Naftali, for your perspective, calling us all the way from Elgeyo Marakwet. Keep still sending your feedback on the same. I hope they will answer satisfactorily on this matter, Panyako. And that's one thing I started with. I said, fine, it was a very praised CBA at the time. What is the content? Is it just the extension of the contract?
The CPA, according to there are laws and rules that govern CPAs.
Yes.
You see even now on the website, we're just saying there's enhancement. We are not giving figures. It is not allowed by law to give the details of a CPA that has not been signed and registered in court. It's not allowed because that can cause problems.
So this is not registered?
It's not signed. It's not
and
registered.
Not signed.
And that's what we expect it to be registered, signed, and made public.
Okay.
Because when you go to negotiate and you start negotiating and you want to negotiate with the entire crowd, when people have elected you, they have given you the mandate to represent them. And therefore, what you do, you are doing in trust. The fiduciary trust of these people. They trust you. They believe when you sit on that table, you represent their interest. And therefore, when you come out with a document that they are not happy about it, it will be your business now to deal with your members. But they have given you the mandate because an employer cannot negotiate with the entire workforce. For example, in public sector, we have 35,000 nurses. The government cannot sit there and negotiate with that 5,000 nurses. They have given us that responsibility, and we must ensure that we act in best interest of our members. Coming back to Naftali, I want to thank him for the questions he has raised. Indeed, he has removed a lot of load on me. I have already said the CPA, we cannot put it public until it's signed and registered in court. That one, that's all I can say.
But you would go to a public strike.
But you see,
yes.
When you go on strike, you are going and you are saying our CPA has not. You are not going about the details. Because when you go for the details, you won't negotiate anything. I'm telling you, workers, I'm a worker. We always demand things. When you feel like an issue has not been tackled, when the CPA has been registered, I'll now be able to explain to you why this was not done, why this was done. And we reach some agreement with our members, because as a leader, you must be able to convince your members that you have done is the best thing for them. However, Doris, what we should be looking at is, what is the problem? What's the bedeviling healthcare sector in Kenya? Not what a nurse does, what a doctor does. What we know is these people work together. They are a team. They are like a car. You cannot remove a rear wheel and say the car will go. You cannot remove even a battery and say the car will move.
I'm sorry to interject. I'm sorry to interject, but here is the concern, all right? Doctors began their strike, all right? This is a CBA 2023? All right, then the clinicians got on strike. We have lab technicians going on strike. And now, 55 days for doctors, 36 days for COs, clinical officers. Then, over the weekend, the nurses come out to say, we might just as well drop the bombshell. Kenyans are saying, why did you wait
You should be asking what triggered us to do
What triggered you, sir?
You see, the universal health coverage nurses and other health workers, government had promised us that they are going to be absorbed in June.
All right.
And we have communication to that effect, that they will be absorbed in permanent and pensionable, to be moved from the dubious contract, because the law requires that work of equal remuneration should attract equal payment.
Okay.
And that's both in Employment Act Section 5 and the International Labour Conference Convention on the principle of fair labor practices. Now, when the government has made that communication, it has given me that letter. I have given my members, I have told them the government, you saw us on Spice FM, and was elated. And I said, I've never seen a government using this kind of words to describe that these workers cannot continue working in this condition. Then pop in Senate, without even consulting us, a cabinet secretary says, look here, the issue of UHC, when a question is posed on her, the issue of UHC, we have now decided this morning, Public Service Commission is extending for 2 years. How do you expect these members to look at me? I'm a liar. If I'm a con man, even if you take any letter today, tomorrow the government gives me a letter, and I go tell members we can't go on strike, government has promised to give us this money, will they trust me? Will they trust that letter? That's why I said from the beginning, government must be truthful. It must be respectful. It must be a government that works as a jointed system, not a disjointed one. And that is what annoyed us, because this government has made us look like we are lying, when the government is the one lying to public.
Mike, there's lack of synchrony, according to Seth here, and that is what annoyed them. We're just a few days shy to June, though, all right? But this remarks at the Senate seems like there's two voices in government. Let's hear where policy comes in, all right? This CBA, yet to be registered, in fact, cannot be disclosed what is within. But this annoyance emanates from another voice. So then how should government work?
For example, you saw the other time, before you respond.
So that we can understand
I want you to come up on those because they're related. You saw the other time when you were saying this PNP, they will go to permanent pension in June.
All right.
You saw what Kuria did. Kuria woke up and said, oh, everybody's going to go.
It was a proposal.
No, everyone's going to go.
Was it, I think we even had
where does it leave leaders like us who have trusted the same government? You know, a government like a father. When I promised my child in the evening, I'll bring you fish. I cannot bring a snake. This is a government that is telling you, I'll give you bread, then it gives you stones. I'll give you fish, it gives you snakes.
Seth, people are not yet on contractual basis, are they?
They are.
No, not your nonsense. The proposal by CS Kuria, has it been implemented?
It hasn't, but it has to be.
All right. Let's hear from Mike.
Because I think from policy point of view, our listener and our caller did not know that when you have a document that you're following, a structure, an operation system that is being followed from top to bottom, that it should work. When one of it is not operationalized, it means there's a failure. And therefore, for him to say that I'm not cognizant of what I'm talking about is probably just cherry picking on what I'm saying. What if the doctors are not there? The hospital system is not going to work properly. If the clinicians are not there, the hospital system are going to lack. And that in itself is a failure in the policy. We have a lot of discussions that are going on. The policy, the CBA issues, that's what the doctors are talking about. In fact, doctors are not just talking about the CBA that was done yesterday, but they're talking about 2017. The fundamental question that everybody will ask them is, how long have you been pursuing this matter? Now, the nurses are coming up after 2023, jubilation in a document that was nice and saying, perhaps some of those CBAs were not 100% honored. And the question is, why did they wait this long? I'm not there to judge them, but what I am saying is the government must be able to play their part. If there was a CBA that was signed in 2017 for the doctors, that CBA should have been followed. Government is there in perpetuity. The government of yesterday, another government picks it, and another government will pick it. And nobody should ever think that if he's in government today, then tomorrow he will be there for the rest of his life. It will stop, and when it stops, he'll want the system to continue operating.
I want to understand why these CBAs are very important. You see, we've had different administrations, including the late Mwai Kibaki, the former president Uhuru Kenyatta. In fact, in 2017, we had Cleopas as the minister at the time. And coming to where we are right now, our CBA is just something, because we don't want to imagine their manipulative tactics to have laborers stationed. To this point, why would CBA always be an area of contention?
Unfortunately, I didn't want to say this.
Yes.
But I do not want to see the government of President Ruto continue in the history of the other presidents, where CBAs were signed, they were not honored, and representatives of unions were bribed for that reason, so that just a half of it will be signed, and then a half of it will carry the day. And then when they find some, very, very firm representative of the union saying no to either bribery or to manipulation and standing firm, then they find it a little bit unique. I think we have a system in this country.
Yes, I just wanted to hold your horses.
All right, go ahead.
So that I will come back to you, because that already is a very strong description. But I'm coming back to you, Mike, because we have Stanley on the phone. And maybe what he wants to say might be touching on what you're saying. So Stanley, calling us all the way from Kisii. Stanley, habari za jioni, how are you today? Please let us know what your thoughts are.
I happen to be a medic. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Stanley.
Yes, I'm a medic.
Yes.
First of all, I would like to ask Seth Panyako, where was, when devolution was being arranged and was being voted, because if you are very keen enough, when the health ministry was being devolved, it's as if the medics, including Panyako, who is an official member of the nurses union, did not participate. That's where the problem started from. I wish Minister of Health could have been devolved like teachers, whereby you find if you need 10 nurses in Kisii, the data comes from Afi House, and we are given 10 nurses. If we have to have a minister, we have even seen it over the county here. You find a minister of health is nobody, does not know anything about health. And that one is happening even at the national level. That's why you see they make noise and the other party does not understand. Secondly, we have to be realistic when we are dealing with health. A nurse will see health in terms of his line. A physiotherapy will see a nurse in terms of his line. Medics in terms of a doctor will do the same thing. It's just like not uprooting a tree. You are just cutting a branch. So Panyako should be very careful, because I've seen many of them. Let's say in case of Odeg is now an MP. He stands for civil servant. You see, he has become toothless. His colleague who is now in Kupet, he has become toothless. Panyako is the same person who, I'm sure even now, if the votes are called now, he will become toothless. So to pretend, then early in the morning tomorrow you will say, I've called the cycle of why? And over politics and medical. So what I'm trying to say is all medical. Once these things come over, let us be realistic. If you want to devolve health, devolve it fully, so that we don't have the central government fully participating in health matters than even the county. If you want the health to go up to the central government, let it go back, like education. Otherwise, we'll continue having problems, because once you have signed the CBA, the implementer is the governor. The governor might not implement most of the things that they want. Like now, us in Kisii, we are adding salary in terms of peanuts, 1 month off, the other month in. You see now. So Panyako, what I'm trying to say, you have entered into politics, 100% politics, and less in nothing.
Stanley Omach for calling us all the way from Kisii. Mike, I cut you short. I apologize. But we are back because he's touched on a few things. In fact, he's even brought us to another level, the role of the county governments and the national government. And of course, just picking it from where you left it, you were mentioning why you might have had reservations touching on the CBA and the continuation of how it's been handled in the previous governments compared to the KK administration. Please pick it up from there.
That's where my problem is,
right.
Because we are having KMPDU really standing very strong and getting into 55 days. And somebody think, oh, they could be unreasonable. I really don't think they're unreasonable for one reason. They're saying the CBA that was signed and deposited in court and after a court ruling is not yet being implemented. The government of the day need to realize that the only way, therefore, to overshot that is to appeal it. If they don't appeal it, it's going to be on the table 24/7. It's going to be discussed every now and again. And the same thing they could be going through after, doing the CBA in 2023 and suddenly realizing that some of it, as he's saying, that it was not, maybe some of it was not signed as they might have really, really wanted it. The question that then we need to deal with today is the Ministry of Health able to deal with this situation with the CBS? Are they able to deal with them outside the strike and industrialization, industrial moment. You know what I mean? When we have an industrial process going on, it is very difficult to soberly look at these things. But then I had, the Secretary General of KMPDU saying they had several meetings, and none of those meetings, even before the strike, came up with anything that was substantial for them to even append their signatures on. And for that reason, I don't want to see the government of William Somaya Ruto, a man who campaigned on bottom-up, philosophy, who thought that the small man needed to benefit more than the big guy because the big guy was already getting everything he had. I don't want to see this happening in his government.
Okay.
And for that reason, and my biggest fear is this, when Uhuru Kenyatta was in power, he thought he will not go home. And it just took within a very short time and is now home. The question we need to ask Uhuru Kenyatta, does he like his country that he left and how he left it? And if anything, I am looking at William Somaya Ruto, a very young individual. And within 10 years, he might want to go home. What will he say that he did for health? I think if the Ministry of Health is not able, and as we've seen that with this mandate has been taken away from them, and I think it's this secretary to the cabinet that is now chairing this, if the mandate has been overwhelming for the Minister of Health, as it is now, and everybody talking about it, then let President Ruto come into play and say, this is the moment. Let's sit down here, gentlemen. What is it that you want? 206,000 vis-a-vis 70,000? Even if you told Kenyans that I just need you to pay a little more, maybe 10 more shillings so that I can pay these doctors, residents' doctors, Kenyans will do that to have the doctors back in the hospital. I believe there are many, many ways we can actually snare the head of this dragon. But we cannot possibly go for endless meeting and have threats on our doctors, and yet we know we don't have the alternatives.
All right, and not just doctors at this point in time. I like how Seth put it, it's the health sector. In fact, the caller that just hung up spoke on a holistic approach to this health sector. I have very few minutes, gentlemen, to wrap up this conversation. I still feel that, as the people said to me, I have not yet answered the question of what is there for the common Mwananchi. Seth, I appreciate when you said it is not really that there is a guaranteed strike for the nurses, that for sure. But even looking at the front page of our own production here, The Standard this morning, it's called the Cabinet of Blunders. And guess who pops first? The CS of Health, Susan Nakumincha. So what it is there a light at the end of the tunnel? And even so, the role of the county and national governments, until when will we not be sure to understand which role each of the level plays at the expense of an ailing Mwananchi in a cancer center this night?
I still come back to the statement I said, a disjointed government. I can tell you for free, we have been interacting with Nakumecha. We have seen the letters from the Ministry of Treasury.
Okay.
The Ministry of Health makes proposals. We need this money for the interns. For example, they said they wanted 11.5 billion to take interns to internship. When they produced a revised internship policy, they said we need 6 billion. It means if they needed 11 billion and they wanted 4.8 billion, now it is not 11 billion, it is now 6 billion. It means they have excess money. When Nakumecha writes and says, I want this money, Treasurer responds and says there's no money. Don't send interns. When the Public Service Commission says, now these interns should go on permanent and pensionable because to keep them for 6 years on contract is illegal. And they say the money, we have 4.2 billion. In the supplementary budget, we'll provide 3.5 billion. Somebody, COG comes and says, no, how are we going to employ them? It's a disjointed government. Everybody is trying to please somebody. I don't know who is this person. If it's not SRC bringing some cash somewhere, it's COG. If it's not COG, it's Treasury. If it's not Treasury, it's Public Service Commission. I can tell you for free, the Ministry of Health has done what it could have done.
Okay.
By the communication that we have seen. They ask for money. Treasury says there's no money. They agree, we are going to absorb these people in June. Then Public Service Commission goes and say no, because COG does not want, we are adding them 2 more years. I want to say, because there is a notion that we as a union, we kept quiet. The doctors' union was registered, I think, in 2012. The Constitution was there in 2010. We were not there. We were registered in 2013. This constitution is the one that gave us this union. Initially in the old constitution, to get union was not a joke. It was not easy. So we just came in when things had already gone the south. But our people who were there, the civil servants union that was there representing us, like Udeya and professional societies, they should have fought for that. All I'm saying is that there is a problem in this government. It is disjointed. We don't know suddenly. Government does not have money.
Is it suddenly, or is a government that started speaking of the from the first 2 months to 6 months?
It is suddenly, because immediately government came in, they started saying there's no money. When President Uhuru Kenyatta was there the last 5 years, people were going for internship. Payment was being made. We didn't have this crisis. What I'm saying is that the government must work as one unit and not having different departments in government balancing each other. They say, if this one says give, the other one comes, don't give. So we are saying as health workers, we do not like strikes because strikes means death. You cannot reverse death. When someone has died, he has died. And that is why as a union, in 2017, we had a return to work agreement, which moved the nursing service allowance to 30,000, uniform allowance to 25. Uniform allowance, the ministry itself says nurses are supposed to be paid 50,000. We asked for half of that. It was signed by the government. That return to work agreement has been not implemented by the same government. It is the same return to work agreement that we are now agreeing with the government to piecemeally implement it through our CBA. So we are also patient. You see, they have given us something small on that return to work agreement of 2017. So we are saying, let us go with what they've given us. They have promised us that in the next CBA, which will run from next year, we will cover what is left in the return to work agreement of 2017. And though, as a union, we believe that health sector must be united. They must work together, because one single sector, one single profession or a cadre cannot run a healthcare system. That one must be very clear.
It's like this table before us, gentlemen.
It has four legs.
And Mike, let me borrow your expertise, because time is moving very fast. Look, at this a government that is not in sync, and when you're listening to Seth, I'm not sure you're convinced that this is the reason why our health sector looks as it is. All right? And maybe just speak to us in the nation on why the synchrony and sync is very important at this point in time. What do you expect then, as a Kenyan, as a policy expert, to ensure that there are not different voices? He's talking about the treasury disconnected. And the president gave a very important speech on Friday. I hope you had the State of the Nation address. He gave directives to each ministry, as per the Constitution, if you follow closely, the National Disaster Management also, directing each of them to do respectively what they ought to do. Where is this discontinuity? And can we sort this now?
I'm so sorry that most of the union leaders are on bed with government, and therefore they cannot represent the workers, including the Secretary General Potu, and he cannot speak on behalf of workers. He has not come very strongly to actually mitigate on the issues that the doctors, the clinicians, and the lab technicians are having. That's one, and it's very, very unfortunate that it's a systemic issue that always boils down to personal interests instead of the workers that they're representing. But let me say something that Mr. Panyako has said here. He's seen a lot of letters from Ministry of Health. Good enough. Budget is not done by letters. The system in this country is before the budget, you must start lobbying for the money in Parliament, in the Budget Committee. And it must be approved up to different part of levels for it to even go to Treasury and for the Parliament to pass it for that reason. So for somebody to say that, I've been writing letters and letters about your issues and it's a Treasury that has refused, it's so-and-so that has refused, that would winking the public on some of the things that you want to hide facts on.
Are we rigid on that? Is there flexibility around areas of crisis?
No, whether crisis or not, government has a system, and when they have a system, they will have to. You will have to go to get a supplementary budget for that reason. But if they say they don't have money for supplementary budget, then you're stuck with it. I have seen ministers and I have seen CEOs of parastatals that go way into half of the year and start lobbying for their ministries and start lobbying for their parastatals. And by the time the parliament is passing the budget, they already have what they have. Even if they don't have 100%, but they'll have 70% that can push them. We don't hear health workers or Ministry of Health talking about health system in this country. If it is not things to be distributed or donor funding that has come on, they don't talk about the plight of workers until when these men want to go on strike. That's when they bring them on board, unfortunately. That's not how to run a system. That's not how to run government, because the government is supposed to run with or without coercion for that reason. And when it runs without coercion, that is when people enjoy government. And let me tell you, leaders are judged not by how many times you resolve issues that wrangles, but how many times you made a system to run in the country. So what I'm saying is they might also have their own issues, but the Ministry of Health need to know that if they're lobbying for money, it must start way higher. I want to conclude by saying this.
Yes.
When cholera will strike, we will see a catastrophe that is bigger than the flood we are seeing today. And I want to say this, how many people are dying of chronic illness today that we don't care about? If you're a government officer out there and you do not want to solve this impediment, this curse will be on you and your children. You may think that you're in opposition today, and therefore you can decide whatever you want, but it will be on you. The people that are dying out there and cursing on the government, it's not going to be easy. Let the system work, regardless of who you are in government.
All right, let the system work, regardless of who you are in government. Seth Panyako, SG NAS Union, what would be your closing remarks? In fact, in as far as this looming NASA strike is concerned, that is the heart of Kenyans right now. It's already a struggle.
My closing remark is that I want the president to allow the departments to function. Because once the president makes a pronouncement, for example, that this is the money that we have given you, there is no any minister, PS or anybody who can open that discussion. He has closed the discussions completely. I would like him to retrieve, to take back those words and allow his departments to work so that these ministries can be able to, Treasury can be able to say, well, doctors, this is what we can give you. The clinical officers, this is what we can give you. Nurses, we can give you this, because he has technical people. He has put in those departments to work. But if he comes as the president and he says, this is the money we have given you, full stop, I can tell you for free, there is nobody in government who can insubordinate the president. Thank you.
So the buck stops with the president.
Retrieving, taking back those words. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Seth Panyako, the SG Kenya National Union of Nurses, for gracing the screens, and also Mike Agwanda for sharing the public policy perspective of each of these things we've looked at today. Ultimately, health is not a privilege, gentlemen. It is a right. And every Kenyan surely does deserve this particular, access to quality health care. Now, we also had in our special report tonight something that you said you watched earlier on, the anatomy of a sick nation. And the silent crisis in cancer management persists globally, especially in developing countries. Experts warn that this crisis, whose debilitating effects intensify every year, is likely to increase mortality rates if nothing is done to stem its spread. Kenya, which records at least 42,000 new cancer cases annually, is among countries grappling with this dramatic rise that is stretching the already limited resources. In our week-long special coverage, Anatomy of a Sick Nation, our health and science reporter, Gloria Milimu, looks at how lack of equity in cancer care and death